Good morning and welcome to Sunday School. Today I'd like to look again, this time at one passage in the Old Testament and another passage in the New Testament. And I want to talk about holiness and compassion. What is compassion? What is compassion in the context of holiness? And we're going to look at a passage in Deuteronomy. So I want you to find Deuteronomy, part of the Pentateuch, the first five books of the Bible, chapter 15. And then also we'll be in Matthew chapter 25. So toward the back end of Matthew in the New Testament, Deuteronomy in the Old Testament. We're going to start with Deuteronomy chapter 15. And I want to look at verses 4 through 11. So that's what I'll read first. All right, so Deuteronomy 15, verses 4 through 11. Save when there shall be no poor among you, for the Lord shall greatly bless thee in the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee for an inheritance to possess it. Only if thou carefully hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God to observe to do all these commandments which I command thee this day. For the Lord thy God blesseth thee, as he promised thee. Thou shalt lend unto many nations, but thou shalt not borrow. Thou shalt reign over many nations, but they shall not reign over thee. If there be among you a poor man of any of thy brethren within any of thy gates in thy land which the Lord thy God giveth thee, thou shalt not harden thine heart, nor shut thine hand from the poor brother, but thou shalt open thy hand wide unto him, and shalt surely lend him sufficient for his need in that which he wanteth. Beware that there be not a thought in thy wicked heart, saying, the seventh year, the year of release is at hand, and thine eye be evil against thy poor brother, and thou givest him not, and he cry unto the Lord against thee, and it be sin unto thee. Thou shalt surely give him, and thine heart shall not be grieved, when thou givest unto him, because that for this thing the Lord thy God shall bless thee in all thy works, and in all that thou puttest thine hand unto. For the poor shall never cease out of the land. Therefore I command thee, saying, thou shalt open thine hand wide unto thy brother, to thy poor, and to thy needy in thy land. Now go to Matthew chapter 25. Matthew chapter 25. And I want to read just a few verses, 42 to 45. Actually, 42 to 46. That's what I want to look at. Matthew chapter 25, 42 to 46. For I was hungry, and you gave me no meat. I was thirsty, and you gave me no drink. I was a stranger, and you took me not in. Naked, and you clothed me not. Sick and in prison, and you visited me not. Then shall they also answer him, saying, Lord, when saw we thee hungry, or thirsty, or a stranger, or naked, or sick, or in prison, and did not minister unto thee? Then shall he answer them, saying, verily I say unto you, inasmuch as ye did it not to one of the least of these, ye did it not to me. Okay, kind of same thing being said in both the Old Testament and the New Testament. And in the Old Testament passage, we see that God gave Israel a pretty startling promise. If they walked in total obedience, God says, there shall be no poor among you. That wasn't just about economics. That's a spiritual barometer. If you walk in total obedience, you're not going to be poor. There's not going to be any poor among you. So as holiness people, we should be a people that's set apart, holy. We should reflect God's abundance and care. Poverty in the community was often a sign that the covenant of love had been neglected. Now, while verse 4 says, there shall be no poor, now I'm in Deuteronomy, there shall be no poor, verse 11 acknowledges that the poor will always be in the land. That's not a contradiction. That's a call to what I would say perpetual vigilance. Always vigilance means be on the watch. Because we live in a fallen world, the word holy it takes on, I think, even greater importance. Holy, the holy response is in hand that is always open, is what God is saying here. You're always going to have poor. So there's always a response that is there for you. And then he gets into the condition of the heart. When you look at Deuteronomy 15, verses 7 through 11. And Moses here, Moses the writer, warns against a wicked heart. That's probably the words you have in your translation. Now, in the holiness tradition, we emphasize what's known as entire sanctification, the cleansing of the inner motives. You may still do something that appears to be bad, appears to be awful, but if your motives were pure, you're still acting properly. You just made a mistake. Mistakes are not sin if they come from pure motivation. Mistakes aren't sin really, because by definition, a mistake means that I would take it, a mistake means your motives are pure. You just messed up in the execution of what you were doing. So Moses warns against this wicked heart. And so what's this got to do with pure motives? Well, Moses explicitly commands the Israelites not to harden their hearts or shut their hands. And there is this year of Jubilee, and this is the 7-year trap, where they didn't plant things, they stored up things for a year of Jubilee to let the land rest. And as you might have noticed as I was reading along there in Deuteronomy, the people were tempted to say, well, it's the year of Jubilee, we don't have to help the poor in a year when we're not producing anything. And people were tempted by that, to withhold loans because the year of release, the year of Jubilee, the year of release also, when debts were canceled. That was near, he's saying. Well, the message here is a holy person doesn't calculate their personal loss when somebody's in need, when a brother is in need. They calculate the other person's necessity. Yeah, I think that's the key point. I hope you understand that. Yeah, it's more painful economically to help when we don't really have the resources. But what Moses is saying here, what God is saying through Moses is, don't count your economic costs, count your brother's need. Count the other person's need. And then in verse 10 here in Deuteronomy, it says to give cheerfully. Our heart must not be grieved when we give. Holiness means our desires have been realigned with God's desires. Now, when you flip to the Matthew passage, Matthew chapter 25, verses 42 to 45 or 46, depending on your translation, 46 in the King James, Jesus takes the social commands of Deuteronomy and makes them personal. See, that's a lot of what the New Testament is. It personalizes the laws of the Old Testament, and it makes it harder. Old Testament, thou shalt not kill. New Testament, don't even think about it. That's harder. So he says, help the poor, not because I told you to. He doesn't just say that. He says it, but he doesn't only say that. He doesn't stop there. Help the poor because I told you to. He says, help the poor because that's me. That's me. And he talks about the sin of omission here. The so-called goats in this passage aren't condemned for murder or theft. They're condemned for what they didn't do. In holiness teaching, we believe God holds us accountable for the light we have and the opportunities we ignore. And we've been given a great deal of light, teaching, biblical preaching, understanding, and we've also been given great opportunity. We can't ignore those opportunities that we have to live out our faith for others, to influence them for Christ. So what's practical holiness here? It talks about hunger and thirst in this passage. So meeting physical needs, meeting other people's physical needs. hospitality to a stranger, an outsider, restoring dignity. That's the nakedness passage. You ever feel undignified when you go to the hospital for a procedure and they give you that beautiful gown to put on that's open in the back if you put it on right? Yeah, you don't have a whole lot of dignity. And so he's talking about dignity when he refers to nakedness. And then sickness and in prison, that's presence in the midst of suffering. Just sitting with someone when they're going through something. Just being there. So you can't be right with God if you're indifferent to the suffering of your neighbor. So to neglect the least of these, what Jesus is saying is you're neglecting me. You're neglecting God himself. So what's the application of all this, more particularly for us today? Well, one is check the pulse of your compassion. When you see a need, fill it. When you see a need, is your first instinct to judge the person's choices or to see the face of Christ? And yeah, people's choices do have consequences. All our choices have consequences. People make bad choices, that can lead to bad consequences. Well, they still have a need, but that need may have been precipitated by what they have done. But can we get to the point where it doesn't matter what they have done, they still have a need? I'm reminded of, there's a story, true story. This was well over 100 years ago. It was late 1800s. It was in the 1800s. A Catholic priest that was assigned to an island, in one of the islands in what's now known as the Hawaiian Islands. And there's a leper colony that was there on the backside of one of the islands where they're completely away from people. And he went there to minister to them. And he contracted leprosy. And when he died of leprosy, and the church came and told him that he needed to leave, and he said, "No, these are my people. I'm staying." And he ended up dying, contracting leprosy. And when it came time to bury him, the church wanted to take him back to where he was from. He's from a different country, a long ways away, over in the England area. Well, not England, south of England, kind of Bavaria, in that area, Germany. And the people said, and they fought the government. It might have been Belgium. They fought the government. The government won, but they said, "All right, we want his right arm buried here." And the church conceded to that. And his right arm is buried in that leper colony in Hawaii. Why did they want his right arm? Because they said that's the arm that cared for us, for our people, for the lepers. What a tremendous story that is. Yes, in some instances, their choices ended up costing them their lives, but he was caring for those people and ministering to them, bringing Christ to them when nobody else would. And holiness is also practical. So I said, check the pulse of your compassion and open your hand. It may mean helping a struggling family that's been in church. It might mean supporting a local mission or simply giving of time to somebody that's lonely. There's a lot of loneliness in the world. And then what's our motivation? Now, again, we don't earn our salvation, but true faith works, as we said a week or two ago when we looked at what James, Jesus' brother, said. Faith without works is dead. We give because the Holy Spirit, as the Bible says, has shed abroad the love of God in our hearts. That's Romans 5:5. That makes us sensitive to what breaks his heart. What breaks his heart should break our heart. And then maybe have a seventh year heart check, like the year of Jubilee, the year of release. The Israelites were tempted to be stingy because the year of release was near. So in our modern context, what excuses do we often use to delay or avoid helping those that are in need? And then identifying Christ in the distressing disguise. Jesus says, inasmuch as you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me. How would our daily interactions change if we truly viewed every person in need as a direct encounter with Christ? Think about that. John Wesley said that entire sanctification is properly defined as perfect love. So, based on the Deuteronomy passage and the Matthew passage, what's the relationship between being cleansed from sin and having a proactive concern for the poor? I want you to think about that. The poor and those in need. And people can be poor in spirit, but not poor financially, and still have a need. So we want to think about that too. Well, that's what I have for you this week. Kind of a deep lesson in some respects. Makes us hopefully check ourselves. Now, the Church of the Nazarene has compassionate ministries, and that's kind of the outgrowth. And I hope it can stay compassionate ministries and not get caught up into what the general church has been doing. They almost all need to be a separate wing, not under the general church's influence. But that is still a very effective ministry that you can, of course, give to, but we always want to avoid the temptation that, well, I can just give to a problem and then I don't have to get my hands dirty. It's the old thing. As a kid, you're sitting there listening to missionaries when they would come back on deputation, and they come to church, might be a midweek service, and have their deputation. And I remember as a kid, it's like, oh boy, they're from Africa. Oh, Lord, don't call me to go there. Yeah, well, I'll support them financially. Don't call me. Can we get beyond that? That's something maybe to struggle with. Of just, we're so blessed in this country. And also, I'll tell you one other thing. When the government takes 37% of your income off the top, or 25%, now I want you to think this through. Half of the people in this country don't pay any income tax because of exemptions and so forth. But if you're up high enough, top end is 37%. So how would you like to give 37 cents of every dollar to the government, federal government, and then the state takes their cut? So that's another 5-6%. So there you're over 40% of what you make goes to fund whatever the government spends it on. Well, that would include Social Security. So one way to think about this is, I've already contributed substantially to the needy and the poor. Well, true. And I have seen studies that indicate, surveys that indicate that since the advent of Social Security in the 1930s, charitable giving has gone down, and a reason for that decline is the presence of Social Security. People think, I'm already giving through the nose. I don't need to give anymore. So that's just on the financial side of things. So if you're losing 40% of your income on state and federal taxes, let's say you give another 10 to 15% of your income, that's over half of your income right there that's just gone. And that can have an impact on one's mindset. And I'll be honest with you, I struggle with that because the government takes a lot of my money. But what Christ is saying here and what Moses is saying here is try to get beyond that. We need to get beyond that. Don't think about your needs. Think about the needy person's needs. See Christ in them, and that'll help change our view of things. And that's a struggle. It is a struggle. It's difficult. Well, I don't want to take up any more time. I pray that God's presence will be in the service there with you today, and his blessings will be upon Brother Merle as he brings the morning message to you, and we'll see you next time.